The WNBA and all the people that follow the WNBA and try to promote the WNBA don't understand that Caitlin Clark's game resonates with us. I say this every day, and every day I got to deal with somebody else dumb in the media. Caitlin Clark's game resonates because she's got flair, she's got flash, she's got style. I said this before, and I'll say this again. We saw Sue Bird's game. We saw Diana Taurasi's game. Kim Mulkey was Sue Bird before Sue Bird became Sue Bird. We've seen it. We haven't seen Caitlin Clark. Folks that cover the NBA, these people that play in the NBA, these people that cover the NBA. There, I said these people, all of you. Black, white, green, purple. Why don't you understand a very simple thing? Her game is dynamic. Like Diana Taurasi was like a jackass to Caitlin Clark. Why? Her game is what people are drawn to. And then you go to the personality. Her game is different than any WNBA woman ever.
That's the story they don't want you to hear. The raw, unfiltered truth screamed from the stands and across social media that this catastrophe, the season-ending injury of Caitlin Clark, lands squarely on the desk of Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. But what you're about to see is that this isn't just an accusation anymore. It's a confession. Engelbert's own words, her actions, and her calculated silence have become an admission of the greatest betrayal in modern sports history. We've dug through the corporate speak-e, we've connected the dots on the timeline, and we're about to expose the story they are desperately trying to cover up, how the commissioner of the WNBA celebrated her golden goose while leading her to the slaughter. Stay with me, because the truth about what really happened to Caitlin Clark is far worse than you can imagine. And it all starts with the money. Before the betrayal, there was the celebration. You have to understand the context to feel the knife twist. In early 2025, Cathy Engelbert was on top of the world. She was the architect of the WNBA's golden era, and the foundation of that era had a name: Caitlin Clark. The league was moving games to massive NBA arenas just to handle the demand. We're talking about 6 different teams relocating home games, generating an estimated $400,000 in extra revenue per game. Engelbert was front and center for every press conference, talking about record sponsorship deals, skyrocketing merchandise sales, and a future brighter than ever. She wasn't just the commissioner, she was the primary beneficiary of the Clark effect. She smiled for the cameras, she shook hands with corporate partners, and she sold a story of explosive growth built entirely on the back of one 23-year-old superstar. She was collecting the checks, she was taking the victory laps. But behind the scenes, a storm was gathering, and the very foundation she was celebrating was being targeted for demolition. This is where the story turns dark, because while Cathy Engelbert was counting the money, she ignored the warnings. She ignored the evidence. She betrayed her biggest star. The first betrayal wasn't a secret meeting. It happened in plain sight, under the bright lights of WNBA arenas, night after night. It was a systematic, physical targeting of Caitlin Clark that was so blatant, so obvious, that it could only be interpreted as league-sanctioned. In her 2024 rookie season, Caitlin Clark absorbed an astonishing 20% of all flagrant fouls in the entire league. Let that sink in. One player took 1/5 of the most severe fouls, and it got worse.
Well, it all started last year, in her rookie season, where she received 20% of all the flagrant fouls in the league. And most of them came from Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky. And these weren't basketball plays. They were not only fouling her, but they were getting up, laughing about it, laughing about Caitlin Clark getting assaulted. Any other work environment, people go to jail. Last year, I noticed how much it was just Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark was taking all the hits. Caitlin Clark was taking all the abuse. But this year they've added Sophie Cunningham. She gets more flagrant fouls on her than anybody in the league besides Caitlin Clark. And Aaliyah Boston, she's been taking hits as well. But the worst thing is the consistency. So they don't call flagrant fouls, or most of the time, Caitlin Clark could be held for an entire game at a time. They don't call fouls. They don't call common fouls.
laughing about Caitlin Clark getting assaulted. Think about how sick that is. This wasn't just physical playoff basketball. This was a targeted campaign designed to wear her down, to punish her for her popularity, to break her body and her spirit. And where was the commissioner? Where was the league office that is supposed to ensure player safety? They were silent. They were complicit. Clark's own teammate, her protector Sophie Cunningham, had to literally warn the referees on the court that if they wouldn't do their jobs and control the barbaric style of play, she would be forced to take matters into her own hands. The players knew what was happening. The fans saw it with their own eyes. The media even began to call it out, with the Washington Post running a damning headline declaring that WNBA officiating had become a threat to the game. The league was put on notice. The evidence was undeniable. And Cathy Engelbert did nothing. That was the first, and perhaps most critical, betrayal. She had a choice: protect the player generating the revenue, or protect the broken system that allowed her to be targeted. She chose the system. The second betrayal was the gaslighting. When the pressure started to mount, when reporters finally started asking the tough questions about the chronically lousy, second-rate officiating, the league didn't respond with accountability. They responded with corporate PR spin. They treated the fans, the players, and the media like we were crazy for seeing what was happening right in front of us. No one's ever happy with officiating. We're working hard. Do you see the deception? That isn't an answer. It's an insult. It's a carefully crafted non-statement designed to dismiss legitimate, urgent concerns about player safety as just routine complaints. This was the official policy handed down from Engelbert's office: deny, deflect, and diminish. Don't admit there's a problem. Don't hold anyone accountable. Just keep counting the money and hope the problem goes away, but the problem didn't go away. It escalated. The constant, unpunished physical abuse took its toll, exactly as everyone predicted it would. This wasn't a freak accident. This was the inevitable, calculated result of the league's negligence. The injury timeline is a horror story of institutional failure. It started with a quad strain in May. Then it became repeated groin injuries through June and July. It culminated in a bone bruise in August. Her body was systematically broken down over a period of months. Each new injury was a direct consequence of the previous one not being allowed to heal, and all of it was happening while she was being physically hammered on the court. Finally, the inevitable happened.
Caitlin Clark, out for the remainder of the 2025 season, something we all think we knew was coming after what Stephanie White said earlier today. We couldn't be too sure until we see it for ourselves. And with this announcement from the GOAT's mouth herself, Caitlin Clark won't be returning this season. Clark, a two-time All-Star and the 2024 WNBA Rookie of the Year, has been sidelined suffering a right groin injury during the Fever's 87-77 win over the Connecticut Sun on July 15th. If you guys remember that game, Caitlin Clark put the team on her back in the winding minutes to give the Indiana Fever that lead. Clark also suffered a bone bruise at a later date during her recovery.
The golden goose was broken. The greatest draw in the history of the sport was out for the season after just 13 games. But the betrayal wasn't over. In fact, the most cynical, most calculated betrayal was yet to come. This time, the target wasn't just Caitlin Clark. It was every single fan who had invested their money and their hope in her season. The third betrayal was the lie. For 8 weeks, while Clark was clearly struggling and insiders knew her chances of returning were minimal, the Indiana Fever and the WNBA maintained a fiction. They labeled her as day-to-day. They listed her as probable or questionable for games they knew she couldn't play in. Why? To keep selling tickets? To keep the television ratings high? To squeeze every last cent out of the fans before admitting the truth? Day-to-day, nonsense for the last 8 weeks. They lied. They strung along fans and who bought tickets for road games across the country hoping to see her play, all while the organization knew it was a fantasy. They cynically used her name and the hope of her return to keep the money flowing. One medical professional put it bluntly. They could have said 2 months, evaluated in 6 weeks. Instead, they played this day-to-day nonsense for 8 weeks. It was a deliberate, calculated deception. And it was a betrayal of the trust of the very people keeping the league alive. And that brings us to the confession. When the news finally broke, when the lies were no longer sustainable, all eyes turned to Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. This was her moment to lead, her moment to show accountability, her moment to admit mistakes were made and promise to fix them. But she didn't. And in her refusal, she gave the most damning confession of all. Instead of addressing the officiating failures, the lack of player protection, or the deception around the injury, Engelbert released a sanitized, corporate statement. She focused on expansion, revenue streams, and constructive dialogue. Read that again. Her league's biggest star is out for the season due to what fans are calling a barbaric style of play, and the commissioner is talking about revenue streams. By refusing to acknowledge the real problem, she admitted what her priority has been all along. The money, not the players. The brand, not the people. That statement was her admission. It was proof that she saw Caitlin Clark not as a generational talent to be protected, but as an asset to be exploited until it broke. A farce orchestrated by the highest levels of the league. And the fallout from that farce has been an apocalypse. This isn't speculation. The numbers are a nightmare. WNBA All-Star Game ticket prices crashed 48% overnight the moment Clark was withdrawn. Nationally televised WNBA ratings plummeted a staggering 55% during her absence. The Clark effect that Engelbert loved to celebrate became the Clark collapse that now defines her legacy. He didn't talk about the WNBA because Caitlin Clark was not playing. Colin Cowherd, one of the biggest voices in sports media, admitted it flat out. The league's entire momentum was a house of cards built on one person, and Cathy Engelbert let the foundation crumble. She didn't just betray Caitlin Clark. She betrayed the financial future of every player, every team, and every fan in the WNBA. And in the middle of this institutional collapse, in the wreckage of her own making, is the voice of the person who paid the ultimate price.
And this is what Caitlin wrote. I had hoped to share a better update, but I will not be returning to play this season. I spent hours in the gym every day with the singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling. I want to thank everyone who had my back through all the uncertainty. This has been incredibly frustrating, but even in the bad, there is good. The way fans continue to show up for me in the fever brought me so much joy and important perspective. I'm so proud of how this team has only gotten stronger through the adversity this year. Now it's time to close out the season and claim our spot in the play.
Disappointed isn't a big enough word. That is the human cost of this betrayal. Hours of grueling rehab, the singular goal of getting back on the court, all of it wasted because the league that was supposed to protect her, led by a commissioner who was supposed to lead, failed at its most fundamental duty. So what happens now? We know the WNBA held emergency meetings the moment the news broke. But what are they really talking about behind those closed doors? Are they discussing real reform? Or are they just strategizing a new PR campaign to cover up this disaster? The trust is gone. Fans are organizing boycotts, demanding refunds, and vowing to drain the playoff ratings. They feel cynically used, and they are right. But the story they don't want you to know goes even deeper. Whispers are growing louder that this wasn't just incompetence. Some insiders are asking a terrifying question. Was this intentional? Was Commissioner Engelbert, a leader who saw a 23-year-old accomplish more for the WNBA in 4 weeks than Engelbert did in 4 years, threatened by Clark's power? Was this a calculated campaign to humble the league's biggest star that simply spiraled out of control? We don't have that answer yet, but we're digging. Sources are starting to talk, and the truth will come out. The confession may be complete, but the reckoning is just beginning.